ready and raring to go to start your reading for you. So I'm going to hand it on over to Steve, and they're going to get going on your live reading for you.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Steve and Steve Show. This is Steve Hahn. I'll be reading from the Omaha World Herald this evening.
This is Steve Bodie. I'll be doing the New York Times.
Okay. Russian fighter thumps off at reconnaissance jet. A Russian Su-27 fighter barrel rolled over a U.S. spy plane operating in international airspace over the Baltic Sea last week. At one point, coming within 50 feet of the U.S. aircraft, the Pentagon said Monday. Navy Captain Jeff Davis, a Pentagon spokesman, said the Russian jet went from the left side of the aircraft over the top of the aircraft and ended up on the right side of the aircraft. He said the U.S. aircraft, an RC-135U, was on a routine mission at the time it was intercepted. Davis did not know if the Russian jet was armed. It was at least the seventh close encounter in the past 2 years involving Russian or Chinese fighter jets and RC-135 reconnaissance jets carrying crews from the 55th Wing based at Offutt Air Force Base. Air Force flight crews call the practice thumping. 5 of those thumpings, including the one last week, have involved the 55th Wing's 2 RC-135U aircraft flying over water near the Russian frontier in either the Baltic Sea or the Black Sea. It's designed unequivocally to make the RC-135s go away. Former 55th Wing pilot Robert Hopkins III, an author and historian of U.S. reconnaissance flights, said in a February interview with the World Herald. Last week's close call came less than a week after Russian Su-24 jets buzzed the USS Donald Cook, at some points coming within 30 feet of its deck while the destroyer was on a routine patrol in the Baltic Sea. The Su-24s were not armed. In both instances, the Pentagon has decried the Russian maneuvers as unsafe and aggressive, maintaining that the U.S. craft were operating in international airspace and waters. Russian officials downplayed the incidents. There have been repeated incidents over the last year where Russian military aircraft have come close enough to other air and sea traffic to raise serious safety concerns. And we are very concerned with any such behavior, said Navy Captain Daniel Hernandez, a European command spokesman, in a statement. The RC-135U is a converted Boeing jetliner and one variant of the RC-135 line of reconnaissance planes. The RC-135U is known as the Combat Cent and is designed to detect and collect electronic information broadcast from enemy positions, especially radar emissions. Russia maintains a modest naval base in the port of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea, and in recent months has reportedly moved S-400 surface-to-air missiles there. The S-400 relies on an advanced radar system to find its targets and has the ability to intercept aircraft hundreds of miles from its launch site. The missiles in Kaliningrad would be able to strike into the airspace over neighboring NATO countries, such as Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. The recent flybys of U.S. ships and aircraft by Russian jets are nothing new. Aside from repeated incidents in recent years, especially after Russia's intervention in Crimea and Ukraine, the Top Gun-style antics were a hallmark of the Cold War. The frequent close calls prompted both countries to create formal and informal agreements that dictated how Russian and U.S. aircraft and ships would conduct themselves in the skies and on the sea. All right, that's all that exciting article. So now we go over to the other Steve.
All right, we'll start with the New York Times. Obama immigration plan seems to divide the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court on Monday seemed sharply divided during an extended argument over a challenge to President Obama's plan that would shield millions of undocumented immigrants from deportation and allow them to work in the country legally. A 4-4 deadlock seemed a real possibility one that would leave in place an appeals court ruling that blocks the plan and deny Mr. Obama the chance to revive it while he remains in office. A tie vote would set no Supreme Court precedent and therefore would allow a renewed challenge to the plan once the court is back at full strength. Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr.'s questions were deeply skeptical of the administration's position. They appeared to signal that he would not join the court's 4 more liberal members in dismissing the case on the ground that challenges had not suffered injuries, giving them standing to sue. A ruling based on standing would be a victory for the administration. The case brought by Texas and 25 other states could still produce a significant ruling on presidential power and immigration policy in the midst of an election campaign in which both issues have been prominent. A loss for Mr. Obama would vindicate Republican accusations that he has acted lawlessly in exceeding the limits of presidential power and has not done enough to secure the nation's borders. A victory for him would uphold one of the central legacies of his presidency and affect the lives of countless immigrants. Solicitor General Donald B. Verrilli Jr., the government's top appellate lawyer, opened the arguments with a vigorous defense of Mr. Obama's authority to set priorities for immigration enforcement. He was quickly challenged by Chief Justice Roberts. Could the president grant deferred removal to every unlawfully present alien in the United States right now? The Chief Justice asked skeptically. Mr. Verrilli said there were statutory constraints that would prevent the president from doing so. Mr. Verrilli also argued that Texas had not suffered the sort of direct and concrete injury that gave it standing to sue. The Chief Justice said the administration had given Texas an impossible choice, a real catch-22. Texas says it has standing to sue because it would be costly for the state to give driver's licenses to immigrants affected by the federal policy. Mr. Verrilli said the state could simply change its law to deny driver's license to immigrants. You would sue them instantly, Chief Justice Roberts responded, meaning that the federal government would file a lawsuit challenging Texas's unequal treatment of immigrants affected by the program. Mr. Verrilli said that was probably so, but that such a suit might not succeed. The answer did not seem to satisfy Chief Justice Roberts, who suggested that the choice between incurring a budget shortfall and facing a lawsuit from the federal government was enough to establish standing. Justice Anthony M. Kennedy, on the other hand, twice suggested that Texas could have filed a different kind of lawsuit, one in which its standing would not be in question. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said that nearly 11 million unauthorized aliens are here in the shadows. They're here whether we want them or not, she said. But Justice Kennedy questioned whether the president can defer deportations for millions of people without specific congressional authorization. It's as if the president is defining the policy and the Congress is executing it, Justice Kennedy said. That's upside down.
All righty, tidy. Thank you, Steve. Let's see. Hundreds of migrants reportedly drowned in Mediterranean. Authorities in Italy confirm another tragedy, but details are scarce. Hundreds of refugees are believed to have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea trying to reach Europe, 1 year after a similar tragedy, Italy's president confirmed Monday. Italian President Sergio Mattarella said during a prize ceremony in Rome on Monday that Europe faced yet another tragedy in the Mediterranean in which it seems several hundred people have died. His comments were the first official remarks on an incident that had previously been denied by Italian authorities. Italy's foreign minister also confirmed the tragedy Monday, but said that details were still scarce. The leaders of Somalia issued a joint condolence message to the nation Monday over the unconfirmed report that more migrants, including as many as 300 Somalis, drowned on a trip from Libya to Italy. Reports of the drowning circulated among families, but remained unconfirmed by Coast Guard authorities in Greece, Libya, and Egypt. What is sure is that we are again faced with a tragedy in the Mediterranean exactly 1 year after the tragedy we had in Libyan waters. Italian Foreign Minister Paolo Gentiloni was quoted as saying Monday by Reuters. In April 2015, more than 700 refugees died in a similar incident when their boat sank on the way to Italy. The incident caused an international outcry and may have helped to convince European politicians, such as German Chancellor Angela Merkel, to adopt a more refugee-friendly policy approach last year. Gentiloni said Monday that more European collaboration was needed. This is another strong reason for Europe to commit itself not to build walls, he said. Previously, the Somali ambassador to Egypt had told BBC Arabic that up to 400 refugees traveling on 4 boats might have died. According to the ambassador, the victims were believed to have come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. A Somali news website carried an interview with Awel Warsame, who said he is a survivor of the incident. There were 500 passengers, mostly Somalis, on the boat, but only 23 people survived, he said. Survivors, including me, had to use broken wood pieces from the capsized boat to float over waters before we were rescued. We had traveled from Egypt, especially Alexandria, on April 7th, and the boat capsized on April 12th, but we were rescued by a Filipino ship off a Greek island 5 days later. Egyptian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ahmad Abu Ziyad said that his office had no information. More sea arrivals coming from North Africa are expected on Europe's southern shores in the coming months. They usually increase during warmer weather. Steve?
Europe tried to rein in Google. It backfired.
Ooh.
Google is a top target for European regulators and privacy watchdogs who openly fear and distrust its dominance. The American text giant search engine alone gobbles up roughly 90% of the European market. But a landmark court ruling intended to rein in Google has instead put it at the forefront of Europe's enforcement of internet privacy that has upended conventional wisdom about the company and raised questions about the role of commercial interests in protecting people's privacy, often with little or no transparency. In almost 2 years since Europeans gained the right to be forgotten on the internet, Google has passed judgment in over 418,000 cases, roughly 572 a day, from people's wanting links of certain search results to be removed according to the company's records. It has approved fewer than half of those requests, all behind closed doors. Google's total number of privacy-related judgments is double those of most of Europe's biggest individual national authorities over the same period, even though these public agencies address a wider range of data protection complaints. Despite a history of animosity toward the company, national regulators have handed over the review powers to Google with few complaints, saying they are merely following Europe's complex data protection rules. Other search companies, including Microsoft, have been given the same authority through their number of judgment pales by comparison. Some consumer groups and privacy experts are not satisfied with the arrangement. They have sounded alarm bells over a for-profit company, one that relies on tapping into people's digital lives to make billions of dollars, and that is the subject of multiple privacy and antitrust investigations, playing such a central role in protecting individuals' data and doing so in such a secretive manner. Google has not responded to requests, including an open letter last year from primarily European and American academics to explain how review process works. And since 2014, when the right to be forgotten was enshrined, the company had declined to give any journalists access to the team of fewer than 50 employees, mostly lawyers and paralegals based at its Dublin offices, who reviewed the demands. Google also did not respond to questions for this article about the decision process. It's a half-baked solution, said Luciano Floridi, a University of Oxford professor who previously sat on the advisory council to help Google handle its role as a de facto privacy regulator. If Europe really wanted to regain control over personal data, giving Google this type of power is an odd outcome. Less than 1% of Google's decisions are appealed to the Europe's privacy authorities, according to regulator statistics. and those authorities said they generally ruled in the company's favor. But several individuals who sent requests to Google told the New York Times that the lack of detail over how these decisions were made left them frustrated, and in some cases angry that a company adjudicated on such delicate matters. These people spoke on the condition of anonymity because they did not want to publicize their own privacy cases. If governments were handling right to be forgotten, they would have to publish data, said Martin Husebek, a professor at the Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology, and Society in the Netherlands and a signatory of the open letter to Google. But with Google, we can't see what's happening behind the company's closed doors. After Europe's highest court ruled in May of 2014 that people with connections to the continent could ask search engines like Google and Microsoft's Bing to remove links about themselves from online search results, the companies were handed the power to decide which of these requests were legitimate. Citing European privacy rules, the European Court of Justice mandated that search engines and not a public body should be the first port of call for the decisions. Europe's top court did not require that the companies make their decision-making process open to public scrutiny. People's privacy requests must relate to online information, like personal circumstances or a past criminal conviction that is no longer relevant or not in the public interest, definitions that privacy lawyers say are inherently fuzzy. Thus far, that has mostly involved people demanding mundane information like phone numbers or addresses to be removed from links to online directories. Individuals have also requested that links to references about themselves on social media, including Facebook, be taken down. In some cases, however, newspaper articles, including one in the Times covering somewhat questionable business practices, have been removed from European search results. Elsewhere, a Romanian website that publishes court proceedings has been hit with complaints.
Thank you, Steve. Brings us to 17 minutes past 6 o'clock. Powerful moment for victim's mother. Senators lament death of Sarah Root, 21. Michelle Root sat in the Senate gallery Monday, wiping away tears as she listened to both of her U.S. senators talking about her daughter. Sarah Root, 21, was killed earlier this year in Omaha when Edwin Mejia, 19, slammed into the back of her vehicle. Prosecutors say Mejia's blood alcohol content was 0.241, 3 times the 0.08 legal limit for those 21 and older. Root died later at a hospital. Mejia was arrested, but he disappeared after being released on bail a few days later. Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, both Iowa Republicans, delivered back-to-back floor speeches Monday as Michelle Root sat in the gallery next to her sister. Also in the gallery, Michelle's son and his girlfriend. Each senator spoke in front of a large photo of Sarah as they blasted the Obama administration's approach to immigration enforcement. How many more people have to die, Grassley said. How many more women and young people are going to be taken from their family and friends? Things have got to change. The president must rethink his policies. Ernst said that as a mother to 3 daughters, she can't begin to fathom Michelle Root's pain. How twisted and convoluted has our immigration system become that an illegal immigrant who, while driving drunk and drag racing, hits and either seriously injures or kills an American citizen is not considered a priority for deportation, Ernst said. This tragedy further underscores the administration's failed immigration enforcement priorities and should serve to spur renewed discussion about their so-called priorities, she said. After listening to the speeches, Root of Model, Iowa, told the World Herald that it was a powerful and emotional moment. She said she's glad the case has received public attention. This should be done to any family that loses a child to an illegal immigrant, she said. I love that this is out there, and I love that Sarah is getting some form of justice. People just need to be more vocal. But she also said that the day brought up anew the anger she feels at a system that failed her daughter and others. Root plans to testify today before a House subcommittee as part of a hearing titled "The Real Victims of a Reckless and Lawless Immigration Policy. Families and survivors speak out on the real cost of this administration's policies." In her prepared testimony, she talks about Sarah's death and calls for congressional action to tighten immigration enforcement. America is a nation of immigrants, legal immigrants, according to her prepared testimony. My family, like many Americans, holds no ill will to people who desire the American dream. We just ask that controls be put into place to control the entry and that they be documented and vetted through legal means. So if such an incident were to occur again, they could be held accountable and another family would not have to experience the pain and frustration that our family and Sarah's friends have experienced. In her interview with the World Herald, Root said that she feels compelled to speak out on Sarah's behalf when she has the opportunity. "I owe that to my little girl," she said. "I owe that to her." Steve?
Colombia reports first cases of microcephaly linked to Zika virus. Colombian health officials said on Thursday that they had discovered 2 cases of microcephaly linked to the Zika virus, the first to be confirmed in the country since the infection began to spread there late last year. But officials said that they did not expect birth defects to reach the scale seen in neighboring Brazil, which has had more than 1,000 cases of microcephaly, a disorder that causes infants to be born with an unusually small head. Fernando Ruiz Gomez, Colombia's deputy health minister, has estimated that 95 to 300 children might be born with microcephaly and that about 380 patients will contract Guillain-Barré syndrome, an autoimmune condition that has been tied to Zika cases and causes paralysis and in some cases death. The total number of Zika infections is projected to reach 200,000 over the course of the outbreak, Mr. Ruiz said. Colombia recently said its Zika epidemic has peaked, and the new estimates are far below larger projections the government published earlier in the year, estimating that as many as 600,000 people would contract Zika. On Wednesday, the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta confirmed that Zika was the cause of severe birth defects, including microcephaly. Colombian health officials said one of the children with microcephaly had been born in the district that includes the capital, Bogota. The second case appeared in Norte de Santander department, whose main city, Cúcuta, borders Venezuela and has a large number of pregnant women who contracted Zika. Colombia has become a second battleground after Brazil in the fight against Zika in South America. It also is a breeding ground for the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which carries the virus. In addition to Zika, the country also has been combating a wave of related infectious diseases, including dengue, yellow fever, and chikungunya.
Okie dokie. Thank you for all that. Frakes and Chambers clash over Jenkins. During a sometimes testy hearing, prison's chief says turnover assaults on officers remain problems. The director of Nebraska's troubled prison system was quizzed Monday by state lawmakers about problems with staff turnover, recent assaults on corrections officers, and what's being done to curb the use of solitary confinement. State Corrections Director Scott Frake said the department is making progress, but still has a long way to go. He also rejected a suggestion from State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha that he resign. Chambers, a frequent critic of the Department of Corrections, charged that state corrections officers were giving Nico Jenkins sharp objects so he could kill himself, and that Frakes, as head of the department, wasn't doing enough to stop it. Chambers said that the officers who allowed Jenkins to obtain razor blades, an officer's badge, and a set of keys to cut himself should have been fired, and that if Jenkins ever is successful in killing himself, Frakes would be responsible. I'll ask for a federal investigation, Chambers said. The prison director, now 14 months into the job, said that although the officers had made mistakes and had been disciplined, What they did was not a fireable offense. Frakes added that he wasn't mad at Jenkins and said he felt Jenkins had lived a horrible, horrible life. Prison officials are working with the mentally troubled inmate to stop his pattern of self-harm, Frakes said. Senator Chambers, I care about everyone under my charge, Frakes said. The exchange spiced a 5-hour update Monday on the status of the Nebraska Department of Corrections. The department has been rocked in recent years by a scandal involving the miscalculation of hundreds of release dates for prison inmates and the case of Jenkins, who killed 4 people in Omaha just days after being released from prison, where he had spent years in solitary confinement with little mental health treatment. The state's prison system has been chronically overcrowded for years, prompting threats of civil rights lawsuits, and has struggled with staff turnover and vacancies. The state's highest security prison is recovering from a May 2015 riot in which 2 inmates were killed and more than $1 million in damage was done. That all prompted the formation of a special oversight committee by the Nebraska legislature, which asked Frakes to provide a status update on the department's problems. The information provided by Frakes and his chief of behavioral staff, Lisa Jones, included, well, I'll do the first one here. Some corrections officers and inmates blame a recent increase in staff assaults on a reduced use of solitary confinement as punishment, according to Frakes. He said that was mostly talk. He said that there was no exact pattern to the attacks, which are up threefold over the past 3 years, but that the cause was being studied. This year is headed for a record with 61 serious assaults and thrown substances reports in the first 4 months. Frakes said restrictions on recreation time in the prison yards in 2012 cut assaults in half, but that was only a short-term reduction. He said he is working with State Patrol and prison officials in New Mexico on new strategies to reduce assaults. Well, the article goes on, but we'll cut it off there and see what Steve has for us.
Chinese parents outraged after illnesses at school are tied to pollution. Chinese families were in uproar on Monday after a report in the state's news media revealed that nearly 500 students at a school in eastern China had developed illnesses, a few as severe as leukemia, possibly because of pollution at a nearby field. Students and parents at the Changzhou Foreign Languages School had complained since December about pollution in the area after dozens of children came down with rashes and nosebleeds and a foul stench surrounded the school. But local officials dismissed their concerns, saying that air, soil, and groundwater met national standards. On Sunday, the government's powerful national broadcaster, China Central Television, aired a scathing report documenting the illnesses and finding that toxins in the soil and water far exceeded national limits. The broadcast of the report suggested that China's leaders were taking a more aggressive stance toward chemical companies at a time when public anger over environmental pollution is mounting, especially in the aftermath of a chemical disaster last year that killed 165 people in the port city of Tianjin. But the episode also underscored the large gaps that exist in China's oversight of hazardous materials. While China has made strides in publicizing air and groundwater pollution data in recent years, it still does not provide data on local soil pollution or require companies to publicly list which substances they discharge as waste, a departure from international standards. Ma Jun, an environmentalist, said the government's effort to investigate egregious cases of pollution was a promising step, but he said China still had much more to do to rein in the chemical industry. It's very important for the central government to weigh in on this case, Mr. Ma said. I just hope that we won't stop at these individual cases. We need a comprehensive review. In a statement, Greenpeace said the episode showed that China's management of hazardous chemicals are dangerously lax. The Changzhou Foreign Languages School disputed the CCTV report, saying in an open letter that claims of mass illnesses at the school were exaggerated. according to Chinese news media reports on Tuesday. Even our foreign teachers, who have always been sensitive to environmental problems, are having a hard time understanding why the media are playing up this issue as such a serious problem, the letter said. On social media and in coffee shops on Monday, Chinese people expressed deep concern about the case. On Weibo, China's equivalent of Twitter, a page related to the case had drawn more than 30 million views by Monday evening. Some people drew comparisons to the mismanagement that had led to the blast in Tianjin last year. Others say they were planning to press their children's schools to conduct tests of soil and water just to be safe. In Beijing, the central government promised an inquiry, and the Ministry of Environmental Protection said it attached great importance to the matter. The Jiangsu city government said in a statement it had zero tolerance for pollution and was taking prompt action. The case of the Jiangsu Foreign Languages School received an unusual amount of attention from Chinese news media, given tight government controls of what can be reported. Chemical companies, which are major drivers of economic growth and contribute heavily to local government revenues, are often shielded from criticism. In a series of investigative reports published over the past few months, Kaikzen, a magazine, and the paper, a Chinese news site, took aim at officials at the Jiangsu Foreign Languages School, one of the most prestigious schools in the area, and the companies that appeared to have caused the pollution. The school, which has 2,400 students, opened a 153-acre campus last fall near the site of several former pesticide plants, including Jiangsu Shanglong Chemicals Company, a subsidiary of one of China's largest pesticide makers, Shenzhen Nebraska Agriculture's company. I'm really murdering some of those names. The reports by Kaiksen documented how environmental officials had initially deemed the area near the school unfit for construction. Still, the school went forward with the project and later played down the concerns of parents and students who complained about coughs, headaches, and rashes. The Kaiksen report also quoted former employees of Jiangsu Shanglong Chemicals who said the company had buried toxic waste at the site before it relocated in 2010. Groundwater samples showed that the amount of chlorobenzene, which is used to make herbicides and can damage the nervous system, liver, and kidneys, exceeded the national standard by more than 94,000 times, according to Chinese news reports. On Sunday, the case gained national prominence when China Central Television aired a report on the pollution at the school. Of the 641 students who were examined by doctors, 493 were determined to have illnesses, CCTV said. The illnesses included dermatitis, bronchitis, and white blood cell deficiencies, as well as a few cases of lymphoma and leukemia. The report quoted parents and students who described contaminated water and smell in the air like rotten duck eggs. The water is strange and tastes a bit sour, a mother of the student said in the report. I have leg cramps, pimples, and the skin on my hand is flaky, a 12-year-old student said. Mr. Ma said the fierce public reaction was a sign of increasing awareness among Chinese people about the hazards of environmental pollution, largely because of the growing popularity of social media. He said it would become increasingly difficult for polluters to escape scrutiny. The old days of being sheltered from public hate have passed. It's time for the industry, especially the chemical industry, to really recognize the fundamental change that is happening.
All righty. Thank you, Steve. Brings us to 33 minutes past 6 o'clock. Ricketts, redistricting bill unconstitutional. Sponsor wants to get it right, but hasn't decided yet whether to try to override the veto. Governor Pete Ricketts on Monday issued his second veto this year, sending back a bill that would create an independent commission of citizens to redraw the state's political maps. In a letter to lawmakers, Ricketts called Legislative Bill 580 a major policy shift that's unconstitutional because elected lawmakers, not members of a commission, are required to redistrict every 10 years. He argued that the commission could amount to a hyper-partisan body composed of former political party activists and elected officials. At stake are the voting rights of all Nebraskans, Ricketts said. State Senator John Moranti of Gretna, who introduced the bill, responded by saying that he had not yet decided whether to pursue an override. I want to fully understand the governor's veto message and then discuss his constitutional concerns with some legal experts before I make my decision, he said. Last week, the bill overcame a final round stalling tactic in the Nebraska legislature and passed on a 29-15 vote. The bill represents a compromise between Morante and Senator Heath Mello of Omaha, two senators politically active in their respective parties. Morante is a Republican, Mello is a Democrat. Under their proposal, redistricting would start with the Legislative Research Office, which would draw base redistricting maps and submit those to the Independent Redistricting Citizens Advisory Commission. The state's 3 legislative caucuses, which are based on geographic areas, would pick the commission's 9 members no more than 5 could be from a single political party. They could not be lobbyists or elected officials or anyone related to or employed by an individual who is an elected constitutional officer. The commission would redraw the state's maps for 6 bodies: U.S. House, the Legislature, Public Service Commission, University of Nebraska Board of Regents, State Board of Education, and Nebraska Supreme Court. After at least 4 public hearings to gauge public opinion, the maps will be introduced as separate legislative bills and placed on first-round consideration. While the commission would draw the maps, the legislature would still have final approval. The commission would be a change from the special committee of lawmakers who handled the redistricting in 2011, when senators fought over redrawing the state's 2nd congressional district. Lawmakers who served during that time have described the process as divisive and partisan. Ricketts said that although redistricting can be tough, handing the authority to a board appointed by legislative caucuses is outside the spirit and tradition of the nonpartisan legislature. He also said the bill represents an improper delegation of legislative power. LB 580 unnecessarily grows government by creating an unelected and unaccountable board and opens up our redistricting process to political cronyism, he said. I am vetoing this bill today to keep the voices of Nebraskans in the redistricting process. The governor announced the veto just hours after both Mello and Morante stood next to him at a bill signing ceremony for the Transportation Innovation Act, which creates a transportation infrastructure bank. Gavin Geis, executive director of Common Cause Nebraska, said an independent redistricting commission was upheld in Arizona by the U.S. Supreme Court, making congressional maps drawn by a commission in Nebraska constitutional. He also said that the Nebraska Constitution doesn't bar redistricting authority from being delegated. As long as the legislature retains the ultimate authority in deciding which maps will make the cut, they are meeting their constitutional burden, he said. Morante said that with the redistricting not happening until 2021, his top priority is to establish a process that serves the people best and conforms to the Constitution. I want to get it right, he said, and I'm not willing to settle for anything less than that. And that's the end of that. So now for someone who's sure to get it right, here's Steve.
Michigan governor to drink Flint tap water for a month. Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan, facing persistent criticism of his handling of the water crisis in Flint, on Monday took home 5 jugs of filtered tap water from the city and said he planned to drink and cook with it for at least the next month. Mr. Snyder said he would restock on Flint water during regular trips to the city, which is reeling from elevated levels of lead and other contaminants after a state-approved switch of drinking water sources in 2014. He said he hoped his decision to drink tap water would alleviate some of the skepticism and the mistrust that has left many residents scared to drink or even shower. Flint residents made it clear they would like to see me personally drink the water, so today I'm fulfilling that request, Mr. Snyder said in a statement. Mr. Snyder, a Republican, is following a familiar playbook for elected officials seeking to make a point. Governor Hugh Carey of New York once offered to drink a glass of PCBs amid concern about pollution in the Hudson River water. Mayor Jane M. Byrne of Chicago briefly moved into a Cabrini Green public housing project in the 1980s during a wave of gun violence there. And more recently, according to the Denver Post, Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado boasted in 2013 of having once ingested fracking fluid as he argued for state regulation of natural gas production. For his foray into experiential politics, Mr. Snyder picked up his first batch of filtered Flint water on Monday from a home where tests of untreated water far exceeded the federal action for lead. Michigan officials who have distributed lead removing filters to the residents in recent months have insisted that those who have received them can safely drink filtered tap water. But many residents have resisted using any tap water, filtered or not, and experts warn that a drop in water use may slow Flint's recovery. State Senator Jim Ananich, who represents Flint and has criticized the governor's response to the water problem, said he was happy to hear Mr. Snyder would be drinking the water and hoped it will give him a little taste of what people in Flint have been living with. Mr. Ananich said the government's efforts would be better spent securing more funding from Congress to aid the city's recovery. We're very quick to do press releases and press events and very slow after that to get the resources, Mr. Ananich said. Mr. Snyder has apologized repeatedly for his administration's assurances that Flint's water was safe in the months before elevated lead levels in the children were reported. He has resisted calls to resign and said he was misled by state scientists. A state worker has been fired. Federal and state investigations are proceeding, and some voters have sought to recall Mr. Snyder. Ari Adler, a spokesman for Mr. Snyder, said the government would use water from different locations around Flint at his home in Ann Arbor and his offices in Lansing. Mr. Adler said, "We need to get people to understand that filters are making the water safe." But he added, there is a hesitancy there, and I understand that.
All righty, I'll do a couple of short articles here from the metro area column. Man found dead ID'd as regular at homeless shelter. A man found dead Sunday afternoon near 16th and Nicholas Streets behind the Sienna Francis House homeless shelter has been identified. David B. McEwen, 59, was pronounced dead at the scene by medics from the Omaha Fire Department, according to a report by the Omaha Police Department. Officers were called at about 1:40 p.m. to investigate, a police spokesman said, and they found no obvious signs of foul play. Mike Sockler, the shelter's executive director, said McEwen had been a regular there for 2 years and had spent the previous night at the shelter. Another resident found the man unresponsive, Sockler said. And below that, UNMC professor named chairman of national board. Dr. Thomas Tape, a professor of internal medicine at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, has been named chairman of the American College of Physicians Board of Regents. The American College of Physicians is the second largest physician group in the United States. It has 143,000 members, including internal medicine physicians, also called internists, subspecialists, and medical students. Tape, 60, will have been at UNMC for 30 years this summer. Well, it brings us to 43 past 60, but got a couple of short ones before we go to obits. You want to go over
I think
now?
we'll go ahead with the obituaries. I'll be reading
Okay.
those from the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Alrighty.
Anderson, Kyle J. Anderson, age 57 of Lincoln. Celebration of life will be held at 1 p.m. Friday, April 22nd at Maple Lodge in Euclid. Memorials may be given to the family. Colonial Chapel Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Barger, Gary D. Barger, age 79 of Lincoln. Services are pending with Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Bernard Barbara J. Bernard, age 67, of Omaha. Mass of Christian burial will be 10 a.m. Friday, April 22nd at Holy Cross Catholic Church. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the Newman Center at UNL. Arrangements by Heafy, Hoffman, Dwarick, and Cutler. Brockmiller, Everett A. Brockmiller, age 90, of Waverly. He was a veteran of the U.S. Army. Services will be held 10 a.m. on Wednesday, April 20th at Wayuka Funeral Home. Interment with military rites. Memorials to the Faith Lutheran Church in Lincoln. Bruce, Ann E. Bruce, age 74, of Lincoln. She was originally from Sioux City, Iowa. Visitation hours will be Roper and Sons, April 16th, which is a Saturday, from 1 to 2 p.m. There will be a memorial service after that. In lieu of flowers, please make donations in Ann's honor to the Friendship Home of Lincoln. Converse, Kathleen M. Converse, age 67, of Lincoln. A celebration of life will be held from 6 to 8 p.m. on Thursday, April 21st at Roper and Sons Memorials to Hearts United for Animals in Auburn, Nebraska. Dantzler, age 93, Carl Dantzler. Master and Love Funeral Home will be handling his arrangements. Doshot, it's spelled D-O-E-S-C-H-O-T, Doshot. Irvin Lyle Doshot, 86, of Lincoln. There's no more information on that one. Eberspacher, Dean Eberspacher, age 86, of Milford. Funeral services will be held at 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, April 20th at Salem Country Church in rural Seward. Laura Lauber Moore, Milford Funeral Home, will be handling the arrangements. Memorials may be directed in care of the family for future designation. Eichmeyer, Dorothy Eichmeyer, age 90, of Beatrice. Services will be at 2 p.m. April 27th at Cemetery United Methodist Church in Beatrice. Memorials to the Children's Apraxia of Speech Association. Hakel, Sally Lynn Hakel, age 57, of Lincoln. Mass of Christian burial will be 10 a.m. Saturday, North American Martyrs Catholic Church in Lincoln. Trump Funeral Homes services will be handling the arrangements. Hoosier, Eldon C. Hoosier of Wilbur, age 90, no more on him. Justin D. James, age 41. There's really not any more information on him either. Johnson, Ronald Lee Johnson, 83, of Unadilla. He served in the United States Army. Funeral services will be at 10:30 a.m. April 22nd at St. John's UCC in Syracuse. Memorials to the Hopewell Cemetery Association. Arrangements by Fusselman Ellen Harvey Funeral Home in Syracuse. Kenning, Eleanor Kenning, formerly of Steel City, age 93. There's no more information on her. Messerschmidt, Rex Glenn Messerschmidt, age 84, of Lincoln. Services will be held at 11 a.m. at Westminster Presbyterian in Lincoln. In lieu of flowers, donations may be sent in Rex's name to either the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research or the American Diabetes Association. Oliver, Doris Oliver of Fall City, age 92. No more information on her. Roberts, Richard D. Roberts of Harrison, Arkansas, formerly of Lincoln, age 87. No more information on him. Ruge, Judith Ann Ruge, age 70. There's nothing else on her either. Sabatka, Celestine M. Sabatka, age 93, of Wahoo. Mass of Christian burial will be 10 a.m. Thursday at St. Wenceslaus Catholic Church in Wahoo. Sovita Funeral Home in Wahoo will be handling the arrangements. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the St. Wenceslaus Catholic Church or Foundation Fighting Blindness. Schaefer, Larry Wayne Schaefer, age 74. Services will be at 3 p.m. on Saturday, April 23rd at the First Presbyterian Church in Pawnee City. Wary Mortuary will be handling the arrangements. Memorials may be made in Laurie's honor to Dubois Community Park Fund. Seaman, Velva E. Seaman, a Hebron, age 88. There's no more information on her. Timmons, James Austin Timmons, age 87. He was from Omaha. Mass of Christian burial will be Thursday, April 21st at Holy Cross Catholic Church. Interment will be with military honors. In lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to Holy Cross Catholic Church or the VNA Hospice. Voss, Shannon R. Voss, age 28, of Lincoln. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Saturday, April 16th will be the date of the funeral. Memorials in care of the family. Waller, Jimmy Dwayne Waller, age 67, of Hickman. He was a member of the 101st Airborne during the Vietnam War. No services, alternate funeral and cremation services. Weirley, that's spelled Wehrli, Weirley. Geneva M. Weirley, age 93, of Lincoln. She was born in Villisca, Iowa. Services will be at Lincoln Berean Church. Memorials to family for future designation. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home will be handling her arrangements. White, Darrell E. White, age 67, formerly of Lincoln. He probably served in the Army during the Vietnam War. Private family memorial service will be held at a later date. Memorials may be sent to Patriot Productions. Wilcox, Dean Rex Wilcox, 82, of York. Mass of Christian burial, 10 a.m. Tuesday, April 19th at St. Joseph Catholic Church in York. Metz Mortuary in York will be handling the arrangements. And the last one is Lois Elaine Wright, age 92, of North Platte. Graveside service at 11:30 a.m. April 25th at Lincoln Memorial Park Cemetery. Memorials to premier estates in North Platte. Olean Colonial Chapel handling the arrangements. And that takes care of the Lincoln obituaries.
All righty, thank you, Steve. Obituaries now from the World Herald. Barker, Joseph Barker III, age 79. Memorials to All Saints Episcopal Church or Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Midlands. Heafy Hoffman, Dora Cutler on F Street. Blinkow, Mark E. Blinkow, age 80, formerly of Oxford, Nebraska. Brahmin Mortuary, Southwest Chapel. Bozak, Rose D. Bozak, age 92. Memorials to St. Francis Cabrini Catholic Church. Heafy Hoffman on F Street. Budka, Judy Ann Lantonfield, Budka or Budka, Budka, age 65. Twirsco Larkin Sasquatch Funeral Home on F Street. Burroughs, Mitzi Burroughs, age 65. Memorials to be sent to the Bellevue Memorial Funeral Chapel in Bellevue and Bellevue Memorial Chapel. Heafy Hoffman, Dora Cutler, handling arrangements. Cameron, Judy Joan Pasco Cameron, age 78. Memorials to the Josie B. Harper Hospice House on Cedar Street and West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home on Center. Castro Rodriguez, Dolores A. Castro Rodriguez, age 56. Bethany Funeral Home on Harrison Street. Sahal, Stanley E. Sahal, Cihal, age 84. It says no services. Colonino, Gay E. Colonino, age 80. Carsby Burkett Swanson Golden Colonial Chapel on West Center. Day, Howard Day, age 71. Memorials to the Tangier Children's Transportation Fund on South 84th Street. Heafy Hoffman, Dora Cutler, Bellevue Memorial Chapel. Derby, Susan L. Derby, age 59, of Louisville, Nebraska. family prefers memorials to Trinity Lutheran Church, Roeder Mortuary, Gretna Chapel. Fuller, Elisha James Jim Fuller, age 93. Kane Funeral Home in Sheridan, Wyoming. Goggin, Jenny M. Goggin, age 90. Crosby, Burkett, Swanson, Golden, Colonial Chapel, West Center. Gooden, Gloria J. Gooden, age 72. Thomas Funeral Home on North 24th Street. Griffiths, Dale E. Griffiths, age 93, of Omaha. Memorials may be made to Korean War Veterans Association, Nebraska Chapter 1 at KWVA in Omaha. Brahman Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Jardee, Irene Leona Jardee, age 89. Memorials to St. Jude Children's Hospital, John A. Gentleman, Pacific Street Chapel. Johnson, Betty Carolyn Serber Johnson, age 80, of Omaha. Memorial service, April 20th, at Lutheran Church of Master in Elkhorn. Johnson, Cornelius Johnson, age 67. Good Shepherd Funeral Home on South 24th Street. Kelly, Patrick Kelly, age 74. Please send donations to NU Foundation on South 67th Street in Omaha. John A. Gentleman, 72nd Street Chapel. Kipperman, Lawrence R. Kipperman, age 80. Memorials to the Milton Marcus Instrumental Music Endowment Fund at Bethel Synagogue on California Street, Jewish Funeral Home. Kohlhoff, Sharon K. Kohlhoff, age 73. Memorials in care of the Kohlhoff family or Donor's Choice, Volsky Funeral Home in Seward, Nebraska. McKenzie, Ina Faye McKenzie, age 97, of Plattsmouth, formerly Weeping Water. Memorials to United Methodist Church in Weeping Water or Donor's Choice, Hammond's Family Funeral Services in Weeping Water. Machias, Mary A. Kersigo Nicholas, age 81. Memorials will be directed by the family, Bethany Funeral Home on Harrison Street. Mitchell, Josephine Joe Mitchell, age 98, of North Platte. In lieu of flowers, please send donations to the North Platte or Omaha Humane Society or the Open Door Mission in Omaha. Crisco Larkin Statsquist Funeral Home on F Street. Murray, Maureen M. Murray, age 64, of Omaha. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the family. Brahman Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Neubauer, Mary Jo Weirs Neubauer, age 70. Memorials to Josie Harper Hospice House or Bergen Mercy Cancer Center, Efi Hoffman on F Street. Oldham, Michelle Mickey Oldham, age 73. Memorials to Encore, John A. Gentleman, Pacific Street Chapel. Randall, Doris M. Randall, age 92, of Blair. Roeder Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Schaefer, Larry Wayne Schaefer, age 74. Memorials may be made in Larry's honor to the Du Bois Community Park Fund, Wary Mortuary in Pawnee City, Nebraska. Steimer, Glenn A. Steimer, age 80, of Omaha. Memorials to Nebraska Humane Society or Omaha Police Foundation, Efi Hoffman on F Street. Timmons, James Austin Timmons, age 87, of Omaha. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Holy Cross Catholic Church or VNA Hospice, Efi Hoffman on F Street. And a reminder to our listeners memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible. That will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind. The memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. And we thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter. Well, we hit it on the button at 7 o'clock, so we'll shoot it over now for a few minutes to announcer Emily.
All right, well, that brings us.
You got that memorized pretty
Yeah,
well, don't you?
done it enough, yeah. That and the Gettysburg Address I memorized.
We had to memorize Chaucer when I was in high school.
Mm.
And you know, I remember some of it. Now, why would, you know, it's written, you know, that's Old English. It's
Old.
half German and half English.
Yeah, it's older than Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Funny the
memory
kind of
word.
stuff you remember.
Well, yeah, well, you know, people with Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
they lose their short-term memory, but they still have, you
Yeah.
know, things from their childhood.
We'll be hosting a non-visual training day introducing non-visual skills such as braille, screen time,
Got a few editorials here.
Yeah, they've usually got some pretty good letters in there. You can get some mileage out of that.
Yeah,
They say that's one of the most read portions of the paper is the
Oh, yeah,
opinion letters to the editor.
I agree.
I've written a few times. I wrote one time about when they had a gun control issue. I suggested they have golf club control because golf clubs can be pretty dangerous. And some DJ read it on the air.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's one of those signs up there that says we're not supposed to give our own opinions or whatever.
Not in here, no.
No, not here.
But this is when I wrote into the paper.
Oh, you wrote it. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you could do that. Oh, and DJ picked up on it.
Yeah, this was years ago. Yeah,
Oh.
some DJ, some rock station.
Oh, like Todd Chase or someone.
Based
Okay.
on what you remember, that this is your
Dave Wingert.
Radio Talking Book Network, your print information network, serving Nebraska and its neighboring states. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you in cooperation from KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide to the NEC Radio Network. Well, that brings us to the end of our break, and a reminder that event is coming up on June 3rd. So be aware of that. We will be broadcasting announcements for that event throughout our programming now until the event occurs. So there will be more times when you can listen to that if you did not catch all of what she was going through with that. All right, well, I'm going to hand it on over to the gentleman in the studio, and they're going to get right on back to live reading for you.
Well, this is Steve Bodie. I'm going to continue with the opinion pages from the New York Times. This editorial is entitled Debunking Republican Healthcare Myths. Central to the presidential campaigns of Donald Trump and Ted Cruz have been the claim that the Affordable Care Act has been a complete failure, and that the only way to save the country from this scourge is to replace it with something they design. It's worth examining the big myths that are peddled about the Affordable Care Act and also their ill-conceived plans of what might replace it. Millions of people have lost their insurance. In January, Mr. Cruz claimed that millions of Americans had lost their health insurance because of the health reform law. He even claimed to be one of them, saying our health care got canceled because Blue Cross Blue Shield left individual market in Texas. Insurers did stop offering some plans after the law took effect, including those that didn't provide required benefits like maternity care or that charged higher premiums to older or sicker people. But people with those plans had the opportunity to sign up for others. And overall, the law has drastically reduced the number of Americans who lack health insurance. According to the Census Bureau, the number of uninsured Americans dropped by 10 million between 2010 when the law was passed in 2014. While critics said the employers might stop offering health insurance because of the law, 3 million people actually gained coverage through their employers between 2010 and 2014. Incidentally, Mr. Cruz never lost his health insurance. Blue Cross Blue Shield did cancel his particular plan, but it automatically moved him and his family to a new one. A Cruz spokesman said the senator had been misinformed by his insurance broker. Millions of people have lost their jobs. Mr. Cruz has called the Affordable Care Act the biggest job killer in this country, and said millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work because of it. This is false. The unemployment rate has fallen since the law took effect. PolitiFact notes as has the number of people working part-time when they were rather work full-time. A 2015 study using data from the current population survey found that the law had virtually no adverse effect on labor participation, employment, or usual hours worked per week through 2014. Reduced costs by weakening state regulations. Mr. Trump frequently talks about his plan to get rid of the lines around the states to foster competition among insurance companies. Customers in states where insurance is heavily regulated, the thinking goes, would be able to save money if they could purchase coverage from insurers based in states with fewer rules. Mr. Cruz, too, supports allowing people to buy insurance across state borders. It's one of the few proposals he's offered for replacing the healthcare law if it's repealed. But the biggest obstacle stopping insurers from setting up in more states is not regulation. It's the difficulty of establishing a network of providers in a new market. And such a structure would destroy the longstanding ability of states to regulate health insurance for their populations. Some states, for instance, require coverage for infertility treatment and others chose not to. Allowing cross-border plans would encourage insurers to base themselves on the low regulation states, and result might be a proliferation of poor quality plans. The Affordable Care Act is not perfect. Premiums for plans on the exchanges rose between 2015 and 2016 and are likely to rise again next year. A few insurers have left the exchange market, raising concerns in some quarters that more companies might follow. But the law has helped millions of Americans, especially low-wage workers like cashiers, cooks, and waiters who previously struggled to pay for coverage. In inventing problems that don't exist and proposing solutions that won't help, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz show that they don't care about helping Americans get health care, which has never been their interest. They want to trash the Affordable Care Act, and they're willing to mislead the public any way they can.
All righty. Here we go. Letters to the editor now. Public Pulse, it's called here in the World Herald. OPA's demands ruined HDR deal. From Scott Sumter of Omaha. I learned at a very young age to play nicely with others. It appears those in control of Omaha Performing Arts were never taught that lesson. Parking stalls, a tipping point in HDR giving up on site, April 17, World Herald. So here it is. OPA, the city owes you nothing. You must work for what you want and be a community player. If you do, chances are you'll get a lot further in the future. Next is a short-sighted veto from George J. Lippert of Papillion. Governor Pete Ricketts' veto of Legislative Bill 947, which would allow young immigrants brought to this country illegally as children to get professional and commercial licenses, is yet another example of his myopic worldview and a lack of understanding of the common good and common sense. Veto of work licenses for DACA youth isn't a lock, April 16, World Herald. As written and amended, LB 947 has enough safeguards to satisfy most skeptics while providing for the needs of those affected in the state of Nebraska, its citizens, and the vitality of our workforce and economy. Most legislators understand this. The rationale that this bill is an affront to immigrants who follow the legal process to enter the country does not hold water. When DACA youths find themselves in circumstances not of their own making, they deserve a hand up, not a push down. Given an opportunity, most will seek citizenship while they work. To restrict one group's licensure opportunity is both mean-spirited and lacks an understanding of the value of inclusiveness of all cultures and races. Remember, we're in this world together. Let's be caring, let's be sharing an opportunity to all people. And this one, savings to be found in efficiencies, from Dennis Schaefer of Omaha. Omaha Mayor Gene Stothard apparently believes that the entire current Omaha garbage contract with Waste Management needs to be renegotiated in order to realize significant cost savings. City calls for study on yard waste disposal, April 2, World Herald. I submit that incremental savings could be mandated under the existing contract and could easily achieve that same goal. On our street, there was a startling procedural change when Waste Management took over. Previously, Duffenbaugh's trucks made a single pass down our narrow residential street, picking up recyclables or garbage from both sides of the street. Now, Waste Management trucks make one pass down our street from north to south and pick up items only on the west side of the street, even though at each stop they are only a few steps away from similar items on the east side of the street. Within about an hour of that first pass, those same Waste Management trucks make another pass from south to north and pick up the items on the east side of the street. That's two passes for recyclables and two passes for garbage, when one pass for each was previously sufficient. This horrendous waste of man hours and diesel fuel should be an obvious opportunity to increase efficiency within the company's operations at Waste Management and thus reduce costs to the city. Stothard needs to stop looking for a grand slam and realize that a string of singles could easily be the winning ticket within the current contract. And this one is Misreading of History, from Brent Orme of Norton, Kansas. In the criticism of President Barack Obama's recent speech in Argentina, April 18, public pulse writer Aldana Tanner, Communism's Human Toll, fails to understand the scope and the context of the region's history. Tanner also fails in her understanding of economic and political systems. First, there has never been a true Marxist communist nation. The Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, and North Korea are or were socialist nations with dictatorial governments. While the crimes of these nations against their own people are truly horrific, such things are not limited to socialist dictatorships. The military junta that ruled capitalist Argentina in the 1970s and early 1980s is a great example. A person who criticized that government or its leaders during that time would have been labeled a communist, arrested, tortured, and likely would have disappeared. All of the person's friends, family, and acquaintances would have often met the same fate. If the person had a newborn child or toddler, the child would have likely been adopted by families of police or military officers, many times the same people responsible for the person's death. While President Obama certainly has his flaws, perhaps we could consider the content of the speech when placed with Argentina's not too distant history and see that it had possibly had other purposes. And finally, let Nebraskans make up their own minds, from Paul Rust of Omaha. I need to inform April 16 public pulse writer Herb Vermas, who now lives in Salem, Illinois, that Nebraskans do not want or need anyone from outside our state telling whom we should support for president. Trump will doom the GOP shot at presidency. It appears that Vermas is afraid of Trump being elected and turning this country around after nearly 8 terrible years of this failed administration. We need someone who will take charge and protect the citizens of this country from those coming in illegally. Vermont should worry about the election in Illinois, not Nebraska. Okay, it brings us to 14 minutes past 7 o'clock. Steve, what's happening?
Back to the opinion pages again of
Yes.
the New York Times. Bernie's Israel Heresy. It's written by Roger Cohen. In New York, no less, days before a primary, a candidate for the Democratic Party presidential nomination declares that Israel used disproportionate force in Gaza in 2014, and that we're going to have to treat the Palestinian people with respect and dignity, that the United States has to play an even-handed role, and that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel is not right all the time. Wow, sensation, hold the presses. The candidate, of course, is Bernie Sanders, a Jew in the party that is the political home of a majority of American Jews. And the fact that his words are deemed shocking or even newsworthy reflects the degree to which over many years, major American Jewish organizations have been able to dictate the line that says there's only one way to support Israel and win elections, and that is uncritically. In most of the rest of the world, Sanders' position would be uncontroversial, reflecting a consensus. In fact, his statement in the debate with Hillary Clinton that he is 100% pro-Israel in the long run would almost certainly have caused more of a ruckus in Europe. Many people in Brooklyn cheered Sanders. He has had overwhelming support with young Democratic voters, and it is among these ages 18 through 29 that a sense of alienation from Netanyahu's right-wing government and the Israel it reflects has been growing most rapidly. The continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, Netanyahu's heavy-handed interventions in American electoral politics, and his relentless attempt in extremists to stop the Iran nuclear deal have all been factors in undergirding the view that no betrayal of Israel to be critical of some of its policies. Israel, as Sanders said, has every right in the world to destroy terrorism. A suicide bombing in Jerusalem on Monday was a further escalation in the simmering violence of the Israeli-Palestinian impasse. No state can accept rocket attacks of the kind perpetuated against Israel by Hamas from Gaza, nor random stabbings of its citizens. Hamas hides operatives among civilians. There are often something sickening about the continent, Europe, on which Jews were slaughtered, reproaching the descendants of these who survived for absorbing the lesson that military might matters. Palestinian leadership is divided and weak. It condones or engages in incitement to violence. But the backdrop to all this remains in Israel's government driving the country rightward toward intolerance, permanent dominion over another people, and their perennial humiliation. An oppressed people will rise up. Jews, as no others, know the lacerating trials of statelessness. The Iran deal finished last year was a watershed in the politics of Israel within the politics of the United States. It divided the American Jewish community, was fiercely opposed by a powerful American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, and it was rejected by the Israeli government. Yet in the end, it won congressional approval and the support of a vast majority of Democratic senators. This outcome suggests a new willingness on part of the members of Congress, at least Democrats, to place some daylight between their positions and Israel's. Jewish votes do not win American elections, although they may be important in one swing state, which is Florida. Jews account for about 2% of the United States population. Most live in New York and California, which have voted Democratic in national elections for a quarter century. Modest numbers concentrated in non-swing states do not, on the face, carry much weight. But voting is one thing, funding another. As Jeremy Ben-Ami, the president of J Street, a growing pro-Israel group that is critical of settlement growth and occupation, told me, excuse me, the longtime perception was the only way to get money was to toe the AIPAC line. Iran showed something has changed. It may still not be easy, but is no longer American political suicide to criticize Israel or reject AIPAC's prescriptions. Sanders struck an important blow for honest and more open debate by raising issues seldom broached in American presidential campaigns. The Palestinian houses and schools decimated by Israeli force in Gaza, the fact there are two sides to the issue, the need for a balanced American role. He set down a marker in the Jewish American city par excellence. My sense is that we will not pay a political price for his stance because he will not pay a political price for his stance because there is an emergent constituency, particularly among young Americans, for a different approach to Israel, one that underwrites its security without writing a blank check for every policy. Whether Sanders will benefit is another matter. The situation is fluid, and Hillary Clinton's more conventional approach to Israel retains strong support. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding father, said peace is more important than real estate. Yitzhak Rabin came to the same conclusion and derided by Netanyahu was assassinated by a messianic Israeli fanatic. Netanyahu's government is a don't give an inch government. There comes a time, said Sanders, when if we pursue justice and peace, we're going to have to say that Netanyahu makes mistakes. A growing number of Americans committed to Israel's security and its Jewish and democratic character believe that that time is now.
Okey smoky. Very good, Steve. What do I see here? Amy Dickinson column in the World Herald. Happy wife can't stop thinking about coworker. Dear Amy, I thought I had the perfect marriage until I met Brian about 3 years ago. I instantly felt a connection and attraction to him. I try my hardest not to feel this way. I don't see him very often. We work together, but I can't shake these feelings. We have spoken about the mutual attraction between us and have kissed once. He doesn't do anything to encourage a relationship between us, and neither do I. He is in the process of getting divorced, and I know he doesn't want to come between me and my husband. I just can't stop thinking about him, even if I don't see him for months at a time. I'm becoming numb and depressed at home, and I don't know how to change these feelings. I can't talk to anyone about this. I feel ashamed, guilty, and embarrassed. I've been married for 26 years and have never looked at it or thought about another man before. How can I stop these feelings? Signed, Sad. Dear Sad, you say that you and Brian have not done anything to encourage a relationship, but sharing intimacies, complaining about your marriage, and kissing are all choices that foster an intimate relationship between two people while also interfering with your respective marriages. Your reaction now, feeling depressed, numb, and ashamed about your work relationship, will also interfere with your marriage. You are having an emotional affair, and it doesn't matter how often you actually see this other person because your emotions are running the show. If you want to save your marriage, then you will have to re-engage with your husband and be very intentional about trying to repair and recommit to him. You cannot do that and have any contact with this other person because the contact, in person or textual, triggers the cycle. The best way to deal with this is to invite your husband to strategize about how to improve your marriage. Counseling can help. Next, dear Amy. I recently planned a 3-day driving trip for 4 other couples to a remote location in another country. All the arrangements were made based on my experience traveling there many times for almost 20 years. But I made it clear I was not the guide and was doing this as a courtesy. I wired the hotel deposit, emailed information and paperwork to everyone, and even had a get-together in my home the week before the trip so everyone could meet. 2 of the couples were old friends, but I knew the wife of another, Brenda, very slightly. Prior to the trip, Brenda sent me numerous emails challenging and questioning every part of the plan. At the destination, she complained about the parking, didn't like the food or the amenities, and took advantage of the kindness of a friend of ours who lives there. These negative comments were voiced to me on a daily basis, and it affected my enjoyment of the trip. On the other hand, when we got home, she sent me a lovely thank you. Excuse me. There seems to be a big disconnect between her actions and her perception of the effect of her behavior. So what do I do when or if, she calls and wants to get together. Do I lie and say that I'm busy, or do I just tell her that I don't see our friendship moving forward? Signed, wanting to be an ex. Dear ex. Because this person was polite enough to thank you for allowing her to ruin your vacation, you seem to think she will want to engage in an ongoing friendship with you. I doubt this. But if she makes an overture, you can very easily say, no, thank you, I'm still trying to get over our vacation. Finally, dear Amy, I'm responding to a desperate parent who wanted to control her daughter's major in college. We supported our daughter through college, both emotionally and financially. We never criticized her choices. They belonged to her and to her only. 1 year out of college, with a year of full-time work under her belt, she was offered 2 jobs the first week after graduation. She is off to nursing school at an Ivy League college. She did this all entirely by herself. She owns this. Are we proud? You bet. To the worried mother, I say, let her go. Sound proud mom. Dear mom, if the student is doing well, I agree that parents should suggest but not dictate academic choices.
From the New York Times, we're going to do a book review here of David Mean's Dystopia. It's not your average war novel.
Right.
Dystopia, David Mean's dark acid trip of a novel, reads like a phantasmagorical and sometimes pretentious mashup of David Foster's Wallace's Infinite Jest, Charlie Kaufman's screenplay Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Michael Hare's Vietnam classic Dispatches. It's a meditation on war. It's a meditation on war, not just Vietnam, Mr. Mean suggests, but the continuum of combat that links veterans throughout history and the toll it takes on soldiers and families and loved ones. It's also a portrait of a troubled America in the late 1960s and early 70s, an American reeling from unemployment and lost dreams and seething with anger and uncannily familiar in many ways to the America of today. Perhaps most insistently, it's an exploration of how storytelling, the causal narratives we manufacture in our heads, shape our identities and provides a hedge against the chaos of real life. These more cerebral aspects of Dystopia, the much anticipated first novel by a veteran short story writer, can weigh the book down like 2 heavy ornaments and garlands on a spindly Christmas tree. At the same time, the reader cannot help but admire its ambitions, and Mr. Mean's potent language helps power the story over its more lubricous sections. The book's Debkovian premise is this: we are reading a novel by a young Vietnam War veteran named Eugene Allen, who committed suicide. His novel is titled Dystopia. It's placed in a context by a series of editor's notes and comments from relatives, friends, and acquaintances who recount his tortured efforts to come to terms with his war experiences and the struggles of his mentally unstable sister, whose boyfriend died in Vietnam. The counterfactual history of Dystopia transports us to a fictional America in the mid-20th century. President Kennedy has survived several assassination attempts and will be killed in 1970. Fires set by rioters have been burned through Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and rage and violence are spreading across the country, fueled by the devaluation of the blue-collar worker, the destruction of a factory infrastructure, and large numbers of wayward vets and minorities seeking justice. A controversial treatment called enfolding, involving the reenactment of past events and the drug called trapezoid, has been used on many Vietnam veterans to repress traumatic war memories. The treatment of Mr. Mean's rights was part of the Kennedy administration's initiative to solve mental illness problems in general and return Vietnam vets problem and the returning Vietnam vet problem in particular. Immersion in icy cold water or orgasmic sex can suspend the unfolding process and prompt acid-like flashbacks, but subjects are warned. Remembering is dangerous. To know what's up there in your heads would mean you're back in the horrific state you were before you got the treatment. One vet whose trauma was amplified, not cured, by unfolding is Rake, a psychopath who has kidnapped a girl named Meg and gone on a murderous rampage across Michigan, parts of which are referred to as a lawless zone of anarchy. Hot on his trail are two members of the Psych Corps known as Singleton and Wendy, who have been scarred by the war. Wendy was once in love with Steve Williams and lost his leg in Vietnam. Singleton experienced something traumatic there too, but because he was enfolded, he cannot recall exactly what happened. Eugene's novel pivots around an inquiry as to how histories of Singleton, Meg, and Rake were entangled back in Vietnam, an inquiry that italicizes the essential role that memory or its erasure plays in an individual's sense of self and the sort of historical amnesia that can come to affect a nation blundering deeper and deeper into a pointless war. Eugene and his characters, Rake, Meg, Singleton, and Wendy, bear more than a passing resemblance to the alienated, isolated people who populate Mr. Mean's short stories, The Spot and The Secret Goldfish, just as mythologized landscape of Michigan here, full echoes of Hemingway, set to the soundtrack of Iggy Pop, will be familiar to many of his longtime readers. But the precision and control of the tales has given away pages to a shaggy dog approach that part time of consciousness, part apocalyptic conjuration, and part analogy-laden metafiction. The novel, both Eugene and Mr. Means, is not without its flaws. Their efforts to capture the big picture, the one that goes forward in time and backward and shows the vastness of eternity, can overpower the story, reducing the characters to specks moving across a literary landscape. The dystopian, Mad Max-like storyline about damaged Vietnam vets like Rake gravitated to an increasingly violent Michigan has the unfortunate effect of suggesting that soldiers in general are troubled, wayward souls prone to emotional instability. And the novel's myriad literary allusions and touchstones, in addition to this already mentioned Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, Faulkner's Absalom, Nebkov's Ada, and the Terrence Malick film Badlands, and Salinger's Glass Stories are also in vogue, underscore the book's most derivative, self-conscious tendencies. Dystopia is at its most haunting, not when it's trying to fulfill its big visionary aspirations, but when it's focusing on singular moments in its characters' lives, when hope and disappointment and loss converge, when Mr. Means is using his fierce, evocative prose not to try to forge a giant dystopian world, but to capture individual men and women flailing efforts to make sense of random, windblown, senseless events.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Brings us to 32 minutes past 7 o'clock. People column here in the Herald. Everybody Loves Raymond star Doris Roberts dies at 90. Doris Roberts, who played the tart-tongued, endlessly meddling mother on Everybody Loves Raymond, has died, a family spokeswoman said. She was 90. Roberts died overnight in her sleep, spokeswoman Janet Daly said Monday. Daly was told of the death by Roberts' son, Michael Kanata. Roberts won 4 Emmy Awards for her portrayal of Marie Barone on CBS's Everybody Loves Raymond, and received a total of 7 nods as Best Supporting Actress for the show. Next, Pearl Jam, Boston cancels shows over North Carolina law. Pearl Jam is the latest musical group to say it's canceling a North Carolina show because it opposes the state's new LGBT law, House Bill 2, which it calls a despicable piece of legislation that encourages discrimination against an entire group of American citizens. Pearl Jam was scheduled to play Wednesday in Raleigh. Earlier Monday, Tom Schultz, guitarist for rock group Boston, announced the group's decision to cancel 3 concerts in the state. Concerts were scheduled for Charlotte, Greensboro, and Raleigh early next month. And director J.A. Bayona set for Jurassic World sequel. Universal Pictures has announced J.A. Bayona will direct the sequel to Jurassic World. Bayona will be taking up the mantle from Colin Trevorrow, who relaunched the Jurassic franchise in 2015. Jurassic World earned over $1.7 billion worldwide. Trevorrow will still co-write and executive produce the sequel, but is stepping aside from directing as he'll be busy in a galaxy far, far away, shooting Star Wars Episode 9 for 2019. Stars Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard will return for the sequel set for a June 2018 release. But little else is known about the film. And it says man sues Kanye West title over exclusive album. The Kanye West fan is suing over the rapper's claim that his latest album would be available only to subscribers of the music streaming service Tidal. The proposed class action lawsuit filed Monday in a federal court in San Francisco by Justin Baker Rett states that he was duped into subscribing to Tidal based on West's promises that his Life of Pablo album would be available there and nowhere else. The album is now available on Apple Music and Spotify. The lawsuit says the promise of exclusive access to West's latest album led to an influx of new Tidal subscribers. And finally, Axl Rose will step in for Brian Johnson on AC/DC tour. Along with prepping a reunion tour with Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose is joining AC/DC on the road. AC/DC announced Saturday that Rose will replace Brian Johnson on its Rock or Bust World Tour beginning May 7 in Lisbon. Rose will reunion with the band through its European dates and 10 rescheduled U.S. shows. Johnson is pulling out of the tour after being advised by doctors that future concerts could permanently impair his hearing. The band says it supports its decision to withdraw as much as it wants the tour to end as it started. Rose will return to Guns N' Roses for a summer tour. The band performed Saturday at the Coachella Music and Arts Festival, where it was joined by AC/DC's Agnes Young. And that's the end of all that.
I'm going to go to the business section of the New York Times. Right. Avoiding the dreaded middle seat may not cost you. As flying goes, the only thing more uncomfortable than sitting next to a couple having a spat on an airplane, Mary Rogoff learned, is sitting between that couple, especially when one partner prefers bare feet. Ms. Rogoff, who owns a public relations firm with offices in New York and Florida and travels frequently, discovered what a growing number of travelers now know. The middle seat has become the third rail of flying, and it's getting harder to avoid. As planes fly at record capacity and new cabin configurations could squeeze in even more passengers, airlines are intentionally or not nudging flyers into paying extra to avoid drawing the proverbial short straw. It was literally in the middle of their argument, Ms. Rogoff said. It was just that awful. Her discomfort was magnified when the husband kicked off his shoes and crossed his legs, thrusting a bare foot in Ms. Rogoff's space. Her entreaties with his wife to swap seats fell on deaf ears. Of course, she has no interest because it was the middle and because it was a smelly foot, Ms. Rogoff said. For travelers like Ms. Rogoff, airlines are making it harder than ever to avoid the middle seat based on luck alone. Southwest, which does not assign seats, raised the price of an early boarding pass to $15 from $12.50 last month for those who do not pay up. It is a mad rush when the online check-in opens 24 hours before the flight. Delta Airlines' basic economy fare introduced last year does not allow seat assignments to be made until after check-in, when higher paying customers have a chance to claim window and aisle seats. American Airlines and United Airlines plan to introduce similar fares this year. Neither would confirm whether selecting a seat would be one of the perks eliminated, but one airline analyst said it was likely given the competition legacy airlines face from low-fare carriers. It's a way to compete, said Max Rayner, a partner at Hudson Crossing, a consulting firm in New York. If you want to go at premium times, there will be far fewer seats available at the lower end prices. Mr. Rayner suggested that this shift in pricing models wasn't necessarily a bad thing, saying it would be a boon for the most price-sensitive customers. You can think of it as actually as opening up a choice, he said. You just want basic transportation. Sure, here it is. But the crunch has led some travelers taking extreme measures to avoid getting stuck in the middle. Flyers said they have offered fellow travelers money or drinks to switch seats, paid the fee to upgrade to a premium or exit row, feign illness, or switch flights. Some travelers even report buying 2 seats just to have an empty one next to them. Dr. Sakin Shridharani, a plastic surgeon in New York, found himself on an overbooked flight from San Diego, and a middle seat was the only one available. I told him I'd be willing to take another flight. He said I'd pretty much do just about anything to avoid sitting in that notorious, infamous middle seat. The trade-off was the wait in the airport for 4 hours, but Dr. Shridharani said it was worth it so he could work on the way home. You can't have someone looking over your shoulder, he said. In the end, analysts say airlines are selling a form of real estate, but they're trading in square inches, not square feet. People buy workspace. That's really what they buy on board, said Robert Mann Jr., an airline industry consultant. Some of those confrontations may not give you enough room, for example. Some of those configurations may not give you enough room, for example, to take out a laptop and use it productively. One carrier, though, has tried to address the issue. Frontier Airlines recently installed new seats on Airbus A319 and A320 planes with the middle seats about an inch wider than the window and aisle seats. But for most passengers, the tight squeeze continues, and business travelers say counting on their frequent flyer status to avoid the middle seat is no longer a sure thing. You can't show up at the airport hoping to talk your way into an upgrade, said Mark Jeffries, a corporate speaker and author. You don't see free seats anymore. Mr. Jeffries said he sometimes buys 2 seats, a window or aisle and a middle. It's cheaper than buying a business or first class ticket on a legacy carrier, he said. We find that people will pay for premium economy or any kind of seat assignment if they're traveling solo to avoid the middle seat, said Julia Douglas, owner and president of Jet Street World Travel in Chicago. Some travelers will spend hundreds of dollars more, she added. Another approach is to appeal to another traveler. There have been instances where I bought someone an upgrade, said Michael Winston, who used to travel once or twice a week while working in management consulting. At times, he said, he had resorted to bargaining with seatmates to avoid the middle seat. It's not uncommon transaction. Frequent travelers say with cash, upgrades, and cocktails all serving as forms of currency. But that is assuming that the seats are available. Last year, airline capacity again hit a record high, just shy of 85%, meaning that a lot of flights were full. And that leaves flight attendants and travel agents acting as de facto referees from the games of midair musical chairs. The excuses passengers use to avoid the middle seat are many, they say. Long legs is always one, Ms. Douglas said. She then listed the most common complaints: claustrophobia, a need for frequent trips to the bathroom, flight-induced panics, and a penchant for air sickness. I don't know if any of them are truly medically founded, she said. I just think it's anxiety about being in the middle seat. Of all the excuses, genuine or exaggerated, the one that seems most effective is the threat of gastrointestinal distress. William Bauer, who travels frequently as an executive at a manufacturer of leather goods, said that hinting at medical need for quick access to the bathroom usually prompted either gate agents or fellow passengers to make a switch for him. Make it clear that you need that aisle seat. Really convey compelling sense of urgency, he said. Thus far, I've never been rejected. On one recent flight, though, tables were turned when Mr. Bauer found himself on the receiving end of a plea to swap seats on a cross-country red-eye flight. There was a woman I gave up my aisle seat for because she cried, he said. If you cry, you win.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's a tough act to follow, but well, this article is about money, so I'll go with it. A woman will get top billing, but on $10 or $20. Should Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president, be worried? Is it true that his days on the $20 bill may be numbered at the moment Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew is keeping details of his decision close to the vest while promising that we're going to have an exciting set of announcements soon. Treasury officials refused to comment Monday on a report from CNN that Lew had decided to keep Hamilton on the portrait on the $10 bill and instead replace Jackson's portrait on the $20 bill with a woman who represents the struggle for racial equality. CNN, quoting a senior government source, said women also will be honored on the $10 bill, the denomination next up for redesign, with a mural-style depiction of the suffrage movement, which will replace the current drawing of the Treasury building. Lew did offer some hints about the decisions last week during an interview with CNBC. He stressed that the government would not be just redesigning the $10 bill, but also the $5 bill and the $20 bill. We're not just talking about one bill, Lew said. We're not just talking about one picture on one bill. We're talking about using the front and back of the bill to tell an exciting set of stories. Lew suggested that it wouldn't be a woman's portrait on the $10 bill. We're going to have a representation of the contribution women have made to our democracy on the next bill that's issued, he said. Last summer, Lew announced that the government was going to incorporate a woman on the $10 bill, which would be the first female portrait on U.S. paper currency in 100 years. Treasury received a tide of protest from Hamilton supporters and more than 1.5 million responses to Lew's request for suggestions. That prompted him to delay an announcement originally planned for the end of 2015. An online group, Women on 20s, has been campaigning to put a woman's face on the $20 bill. Jackson's critics say he should not be on U.S. currency because of the part he played in the relocation of American Indians. Susan Ade Stone, executive director of Women on 20s, said although her group has been campaigning for the change, it is concerned that the result will be delaying the introduction of a woman on the currency for more than a decade. We think the projection of 2030 for issuing a new $20 bill is way too long, she said Monday. We don't understand why Secretary Lew can't fast-track production of the 20. In a poll conducted last year by Women on 20s, Harriet Tubman, an African-American abolitionist and one of the leaders of the Underground Railroad, was the top vote getter. Lew's initial announcement last year drew a storm of protest from fans of Hamilton. They argued that the founding father molded the nation's financial architecture and should not be removed from his place on the currency. Hamilton fans also got a boost from the hit Broadway musical Hamilton. Earlier this year, Lew was personally lobbied by the show's author and star, Lin-Manuel Miranda. After their discussion, Miranda tweeted that Lew had assured him, "We're going to be very happy with the currency decision." And that brings us to 47 minutes past 7 o'clock as we
Time for some sports.
Yeah, going to the home stretch here.
Well, this is an interesting one here. Tiny Motor powers a new threat to cycling races. A grueling cycling race is somewhat less grueling if your bike is a motorcycle. Understanding this, some cunning cyclists may be turning the sport into NASCAR on two wheels by surreptitiously giving their bikes a motorized boost. The first confirmed case of mechanical doping surfaced this year when a tiny motor and battery found inside a Belgian cyclist bike, but that involved cyclocross, a comparatively minor branch of the sport. The latest accusation has emerged Sunday on Stade 2, a sports program on the French television network that is also the host broadcaster of the Tour de France. The report suggested that the motor doping is also at the highest levels of the sport. Suggestions that top riders are rigging their bikes have escalated in the past several years, as was the case in the early 90s with more conventional doping. Riders who are targets of such accusations have dismissed them. But several current and retired professional riders, including the American Greg LeMond, are among those who've said it's a real problem. Brian Cookson, the president of the International Cycling Union, has made the search for technology-based cheating a priority. Suspicions stem from two factors. The technology exists, and there is an ever-growing library of videos that show suspicious performances and actions by riders as well as teams. Anyone can buy systems that hide small motors and batteries inside bikes, marketed as a way to help older, infirm people keep cycling. Most of the systems power the axle that joins the two crank arms of the bike and are outwardly invisible with on-off switches hidden under the handlebar tape. Newer, even smaller motor systems can slip into the rear hub to boost the bike from there. For its report, Stage 2 positioned a thermal imaging camera along the route of Strade Bianchi, an Italian professional men's race in March, held mostly on unpaved roads and featuring many steep climbs. The rear hub of one bicycle glowed with almost the same vivid orange-yellow thermal imprint of the rider's legs. Engineers and anti-doping experts interviewed by the TV program said the pattern could be explained only by heat generated by a motor. The rider was not named by the program and could not be identified from the thermal image. The program also used the camera as a Gran Fondo, an amateur and semi-professional event in Italy. At least one bike showed a suspicious heat pattern around its cranks. Corriere della Sera, an Italian newspaper that collaborated with the French program, reported that thermal camera found signs of motors in 7 bikes used in the Strade Bianchi and at the Coppi and Bartelli, another Italian race. Cycling equivalents of the Zapruder film are online videos that show unusual patterns of bike changes that precede or follow exceptional bursts of speed by the riders. Other videos analyze riders' hand movements for the signals of switching on motors. Still other online analysts pore over crashes looking for bikes on which cranks keep turning after separation from the rider. Unlike the thermal images, however, the videos have only implied that a motor is present. In a statement, the cycling union, which commonly goes by its French initials, UCI, said it has tested and rejected thermal imaging. The UCI has been testing for technical fraud for many years, and with the objective of increasing the efficiency of these tests, we have been trialing new methods of detection over the last year, the governing body said. We have looked at thermal imaging, X-ray, and ultrasonic testing, but by far the most cost-effective, reliable, and accurate method has proved to be magnetic resonance testing using software we have created in partnership with a company of specialist developers. System uses a device attached to a tablet computer that sends out a magnetic field. Bikes that create unusual disruptions of that field are then pulled for physical inspection. About 2,000 bikes have been scanned this year, although no inspection took place at Strade Bianchi. The magnetic resonance device was responsible for the world's first confirmed mechanical doping case at the under-23 women's event at the World Cyclocross Championships in late January. It showed a suspicious pattern in a bike belonging to Femme van den Drische. A subsequent physical inspection found a motor and a battery. After initially claiming that the bike no longer belonged to her, van der Drische, 19, abandoned her defense just before a disciplinary hearing and quit cycling. Early in the decade, it was widely believed that motorized cheaters used a system from Austria known as Vivas Assistant. But because that system's device is comparably heavy and noisy, the general assumption now is that cyclists turned to Stefano Vargas, a Hungarian who demonstrated his products to Stage 2. In an interview on Monday, Vargas said that his crank assistant devices could produce more than 250 watts, the amount of power a professional rider might typically average during a 4-hour race. The smaller hub-assisted motors, which he makes only for custom orders, typically produce only about 25 watts, he said, and require the rider to be able to maintain a high pedaling rate, as is the case with professionals. Even a 25-watt boost would be significant during a professional race. Rajas said his system was nearly silent and light enough to keep a bike at cycling union's minimum weight. If you have this system, you can stay with the group, but nobody hears it, nobody sees it, nobody knows about it, he says, of these devices, which cost 10 to 25,000 euros, which is about 11,300 to 28,200, depending on the features. While Vargas said that some professionals and teams use the motors for training, sometimes as a substitute for pacing at high speeds behind a motorcycle, he said he did not know if the motors were also used in races for cheating. But he added that he believed that some kinds of carbon fiber, the material used to make pro bikes, could render the technology invisible to the cycling union's new screening devices. Vargas said that many of his customers who merely relied on the device to keep cycling were reluctant to offer endorsements. It's a very strange market, Vargas said. No one will say they have this kind of bike.
All righty. Call goes Mavericks' way. Put back at the buzzer by Thunder's Adams is disallowed. As Dallas even series at 1-1. State line, Oklahoma City. The Thunder thought they had stolen one. The home fans were celebrating. Streamers were falling onto the court, and Oklahoma City appeared to have taken a 2-0 lead in its series against the Dallas Mavericks, despite a shaky overall performance. In the end, Dallas escaped. The putback at the buzzer by Oklahoma City Steven Adams that would have won the game was disallowed upon review, and the Mavericks defeated the Thunder 85-84 Monday night to even the Western Conference playoff series at 1 win apiece. Dallas had been embarrassed 108-70 in the opener on Saturday, but the Mavericks bounced back and held Oklahoma City to 33.7% shooting on Monday. I'm very proud of our guys and the way they responded after one of the most disappointing games in franchise history, Dallas coach Rick Carlisle said. It's a group with a lot of pride and obviously a lot of resilience. In the post-game press conference after the Game 1 loss, Carlisle defiantly stated that the loss was not significant and that it was just one game. His team bought it and goes home for Thursday night's Game 3 with a chance to take the lead in the series. Raymond Felton had 21 points and 11 rebounds, and Dirk Nowitzki added 17 points for the Mavericks. Deron Williams, declared doubtful on Sunday with a left abdominal strain, scored 13 points for Dallas, 11 in the game's first 5 minutes. This wouldn't be possible if Deron Williams hadn't given it a shot, Carlisle said. He got us off to a good, solid start. Actually better than a solid start. He got us off to a very good start. Kevin Durant scored 21 points for Oklahoma City, but he made just 7 of 33 shots in the worst postseason shooting performance, both by percentage and number of misses, of his career. Durant's 26 misses were the most he's had in 716 career games, including the regular season and playoffs. It was a bad shooting night for me, Durant said. It's part of it. I wish it didn't happen tonight, but it's part of it. I got some great looks all night, and I just didn't knock them down. It was just one of those nights. It says in the notes here, Leonard repeats as top defender. Kawhi Leonard won his second straight NBA Defensive Player of the Year award after helping the Spurs have the league's best defense. Leonard beat out Draymond Green in voting Monday to become the first non-center to win the award in consecutive seasons since Dennis Rodman in 1989-90 and 1990-91. Miami center Hassan Whiteside was third with 83 points. Well, you got one for the last about minute and a half
here?
We've
got one here on the Hall of Famer Lynn Swann is named athletic director at USC. Lynn Swann is the next Southern California football great to get the chance to run the Trojans athletic department. The Pro Football Hall of Famer was named USC's athletic director on Wednesday. USC President Max Nikias announced the appointment of former Trojans receiver who will succeed Pat Hayden on July 1st. Swann was among more than 200 candidates considered for the position atop the high-profile department, Nikias said. Although the Pro Football Hall of Famer has no experience in collegiate athletic administration, Swann is the third straight former USC football player to get the post. This new role as AD fits with my life focus of leadership, mentoring young people, helping others, and giving them the tools they need to grow and achieve, Swann said in a statement. The 64-year-old Swan returns to the school where he played on 2 Rose Bowl teams and won a national championship in 1972 while earning a degree in public relations. To this new role, Lynn Swan will bring the heart and soul of Trojan. Nikki has said he shares our profound dedication to combining academic excellence with athletic excellence. Swan became an NFL star with the Pittsburgh Steelers, winning 4 championships and in 1976 a Super Bowl MVP award. During a 9-year career, he joined the Hall of Fame in 2001. And it's 7:59. We are about finished for the evening. I want everybody out there to have a good evening. Go out there and smell some of those flowers that are starting to bloom, and you can go out and maybe mow your grass in the next day or so. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so might have to wait another day.
As Energy Krebs would say, that sounds a lot like work. But yeah, and this is Steve Hahn. I've been reading from the Omaha World Herald this evening. It's been my pleasure to be with you on this nice evening. I hope we can get back together again soon.
All right. That brings us to the end of your live reading for this lovely Tuesday evening. Thank you to both Steve for being our readers for this evening. It's always such a pleasure to have more readers with us, more volunteers.
Well, another day, another dollar.
Yeah,
What you do.
at least $1 we get.
So,
Yeah,
more volunteers, you can
I'm not going to touch that.
our office,
I guess
online,
turn that off.
She'll
any
go ahead.
information
Okay,
can come
I'll leave the light on.
either our office online, you can call us, go to our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram page, message any of those. We will get to you within minutes. All right, well, I'm going to get you going on the rest of your programming for this evening. Thank you so much for listening to Radio Townsend Book Network, and keep listening. Radio Talking Book Network is made possible by a grant from KIOS.